Hi, and very good morning to you. It's Dean from maverickstar Observatory. Yesterday, if you'd been onto the website, you would notice that I've updated the Earth's Health at a glance. I just thought I'd go through that with you today. There's something very important I want to talk about a little later on in this video, so don't miss that. But as usual, I thought, I'd do something different rather than just thank, the few people that help us with a donation here and there. I thought I'd give them credit and actually just mention, just briefly their first name. So Alexander, thank you. Miles Johnston, I know you've been supporting us for a long time. I think it's well worth me, giving you some credit for that and just saying thank you for your support and sticking with us. And, occasionally I come over to your channel and I watch what you're up to as well. So thank you. Dennis, Andy, Marion, Lars, and I'm sorry if I pronounce your name wrong, but it's Akzentz, is it? I'm not sure. I'll spell it Akzentz. I'm sure I'm misspelling your name, but I don't mean anything by it. It's just that I can't pronounce it. It looks like Akzentz. So big thanks to you as well, and of course a huge thanks to Miller City Farm. I just want to point out that this is just 9 people, and when you look at how many people view our videos every time we put a video up, this is very small amount of people, less than 1%, that actually contribute to the running costs of what we do and support us. When you take into consideration we've got 58,000 people here, if a few more people done a little bit more supportive actions and helped us, we could probably be looking at a lot more data from a lot more regions around the world. And I think you would agree at this point in time it's important to do that. So let's get on with some of the anomalies that have been taking place and some of the things that we record using equipment here at the observatory. So starting off with atmospheric CO2, again 410 parts per million. This is a very low amount, and this is a trend that has been set for the last year now. If I charted all the times we'd monitored the CO2, what we would actually see is a reduction in CO2, but we're not seeing mainstream media come out with that, and that's because CO2 and global warming and climate change has become a big earner for industry and governments around the world. And of course it's not going to be doing them any favours if observatories like ours honestly record the data that we get and show the general public that the CO2 is actually dropping. I think you would agree with me that you have noticed wherever your location is around this world that temperatures are slowly declining. It can only be an indication rebutting the theory of the Milankovitch cycle, where our circular orbit changes to an elliptical orbit, and then whilst it's in the elliptical orbit we actually go into a cooling period, or what is more commonly known scientifically as an interglacial period. We've had the best days ahead of us already, and now we are going back into a 90,000 year cooling period, and of course we're seeing already CO2 fall. So I think it's well worth mentioning that, and it's a point that needs to be bare and put down on the table so that it's recognised. CO2 for the last year has been falling. Now, in the grand scheme of things, 1 year of a particular pattern of cooling is no evidence really at all. But what I'm saying is, for the first time in a very long period of time, probably since records began, we are starting to see 2 things happen that are lined with each other. First of all, CO2 is falling. Second of all, global temperatures are cooling. And one other thing that they don't widely talk about these days is the fact that the actual Arctic ice has rebounded by 300 square kilometres over the northern hemisphere already. That is not a small quantity of land. I've showed you the area before on a map, and the area covers most of Europe, the UK and Ireland. So, this is a big quantity of ice that has rebounded over the last 10 years. And, if we look at the Arctic ice quantities, we can see that it's breaking records for the last 10 years. So, moving on, atmospheric oxygen is, as we would expect, at a healthy amount. We've got 20.9% of our atmosphere is saturated with oxygen. We've got nothing to worry about on that level. But we check it here at the observatory with the atmospheric oxygen sensor, the Illuminox, because people do have a concern about the levels of oxygen. But if someone like us is honestly, accurately recording that data and providing now a 3-year archive of all that data, people can go and check it, or any other anomaly that we monitor, and just satisfy themselves as to what is going on. Now, I have got something important I want to talk about after we go through the Earth Alpha at a glance, but I'm just going to go through these things as they are and what we've recorded. So move on to the latest magnetic pole position. Now, unusually, we don't take 2 readings in 1 month. We usually just take it on the 17th of the month, but we took it earlier this month because of the fact that the pole has actually gone into retreat and has gone back on itself by 1 mile or so. So I thought, it was well worth, on the back of that, doing it perhaps twice a month now. So you can see the latitude and longitude of the magnetic North Pole. The latitude is 82 degrees, 2 hours, 12 minutes, 67 seconds north, by the longitude 116 degrees by 13 hours, 6 minutes, 59 seconds east. The radiation background has dropped just slightly by 0.01 microsievert, so it's at 0.0015 microsieverts. Again, nothing alarming there. Now, obviously, if we get more cosmic rays in our upper atmosphere, it is going to be showing up at some point with gamma, beta and X-rays. We're going to see affect the Geiger counter, but at the moment things are stable and around their normal figure, not particularly high. The volcanoes in eruption are 26, the same as the last time we done the Earth Alpha at a glance, around 10 days ago. And on average, we have 26 volcanoes in actual eruption state. And that's what we monitor. We don't monitor signs of eruption. We monitor the ones that are actually erupting. And, that's been, the trend, 26, the number 26 in eruption has been the trend for about 4 years now. So nothing alarming with regards to that. The largest earthquake in the last 24 hours was in the South Sandwich Islands region, and that was 5.0 magnitude. We have, as you guys know, had terrible volcanoes over the last 5 days. Not volcanoes, eruptions. Not eruptions. Sorry, again. We have had some, high magnitude earthquakes, which has led now, I believe, to around 25,000 people dying. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit more in detail. It's not just earthquakes we're going to talk about, it's things in general. Excuse me. The muons per hour in the UK are at 561. Again, we bob around that figure on average. If you go back in the archive, you'll see. Muons per hour per square metre in Canada are at 911. That again is around about the figure. It ranges between 800 to 900s on average. The sunspot numbers are actually high. That's 9 on the disk at the moment. And I will just say this, the more activity on the disk, the more greater potential for a large coronal mass ejection, or CME, happening in the X class level. So, the more sunspots we see, the more opportunity there is for an X class flare to erupt. Whether that's Earth facing or not is, just purely down to luck for us here. This is not something that you could ever predict happening, only by studying the magnetic makeup of the core of the sunspot. So it's not good when we see large numbers, but however, the more activity we do have taking place on the surface of the sun with regards to sunspots does do one thing for our benefit, and that means it inflates the heliosphere around our solar system, pushes it further out, which pushes in turn galactic and intergalactic cosmic rays inbound. And we've got to be thankful for that, because at the moment, suffering with around 20% loss of the magnetic primary defense that we have with the magnetosphere, that's only going to help us at this point in time. So the geomagnetic field at the moment is currently experiencing a storm. The X-rays are normal, and obviously the jet streams around our planet are unstable, and that is due to polar and subtropical interaction, and also tropical over the equator interaction, and also polar and subtropical interaction down on the southern hemisphere. So it's not good. Some of these anomalies are behaving as we would expect, but when we look at the jet streams being unstable, that's a pretty new thing that's happened over the last 25 years. When we look at the CO2 levels dropping, that's a new thing over the last 12 months. Our oxygen levels are good. The magnetic pole might be showing signs of seesaw action, going backwards and forwards. This is what you would expect to see at the point or the boundary of where the magnetic North Pole leaves the strong field lines, which anchors it down or allows it to migrate very slowly, like we've been witnessing over the last 100 years, more so since 1990, where it accelerated. But once it gets into those weak field lines, if we are seeing sort of a seesaw rocking action, it could be at that boundary right now, and that's what I predicted. Now, on the back of what has been announced by I think it was a university recently, by a professor there in California, he has noted that the Earth's core may be slowing down, could stop and could go into reverse. Well, it's the core mechanics that drives the magneto, and the magneto drives the dipoles or the magnetic poles on our planet, and in turn drives the magnetosphere strength. So if something's happening in the core of our planet on a grand scale of slowing down and coming to a halt, it is definitely going to have an effect on our magnetosphere, on our dipoles, etc., and on the magneto itself that generates the dipoles that we enjoy. And obviously the magnetosphere is our primary defense against cosmic rays. It's our last defense, our last form of defense from protecting us from these harmful cosmic rays that are inbound in our solar system. So big thanks to those that support us. I would love to encourage a few more people to step up. The more people that we have helping us, we don't raise a particularly lot of money here at the observatory, but what we do raise, we put it to good use. I've said before, silicon photon multipliers that we use to build the muon detectors are not cheap. They're like £118 each chip. So just for one component on that PC board, PC breakout board, is costing us £118. There are other chips on there that cost like £7, £8, and then obviously you have to buy things in bulk, because you can't just buy individual resistors, because you're going to be paying more money for them. So we buy, with the smaller components and the cheaper components, we buy them in relatively bulk, so that we've got stock of those. But every time we build a muon detector, we have to order individual parts from different companies. And sometimes, with regards to the silicon photon multipliers, we can't buy just individual ones. And they would like us to buy, quantities of like 100 or 200. But there's no way we could ever afford to do that at this observatory on the scale that we're at. But what we do is give the best bang for each buck that we raise. And I work very hard here at the observatory. I have to do everything, build the electronics, program the electronics, source, the right sort of people to monitor the stuff that we send out, and trust those people with that equipment. In some cases, muon detectors, if we couldn't make them, we would have to buy them. We were talking like £6,000-7,000 a throw. The Trimax system, it just would be beyond being able to order one of those off an electronics company that does bespoke electronics, because we'd be talking not just tens of thousands but hundreds of thousands. I'm not kidding you. That's what goes into building this sort of stuff, just to give you an idea. But big thanks to those people that do stand up and say, you know what, we're going to give Gene a little hand there, we're not going to leave him on his own, we're going to do our little bit, and we're going to throw in a few bucks, and we know that we can trust Gene to make best use of that money. And I do every time, and I've been doing that for years now. So getting on to the last thing that I wanted to talk about, and I'll just change the background picture just so it's not looking at data all the time. Okay, so I want you to pay attention to what I've got to say, and you might act this time on this information, or you might be complacent and just carry on thinking that nothing will ever knock at your front door in terms of great catastrophes. But I can assure you this, and this is something that I've found is common thinking after great disasters have struck. And let's just take the last one with regards to those earthquakes in Syria and Turkey in the last 5 days, with that 7.5 magnitude earthquake that happened. We never thought it would happen last night or yesterday. What did happen? This is what people say, when they have had experience of traumatic great disasters and they've been caught up in the middle of them. It could be tornadoes that have destroyed small communities. It could be, record-breaking floods that have happened in the last 24 hours that has just washed somebody's house away, like we've seen recently in Europe and in other parts of the world, Afghanistan. And again, in Turkey, people will be saying the same thing. We never thought this would ever happen. But what I want people to do is just do a little bit of background research of where you live. Look at the type of property that you live in and ask yourself the question, is this going to survive whatever possible event could be arisen at any given point in time? And what I want you to think about is what is at the top of the list of what is likely to happen in your location. Now, some of these people that have experienced, great floods, record-breaking floods, and it's washed away their community, everything they owned. If they'd done a little bit of research, they'd probably have found that they was on floodplains that hadn't flooded perhaps for 40, 50, maybe 70 years. But they nevertheless was still on floodplains. And, there was always an amount of risk involved in being on those floodplains, that it might flood. It could have been avoided by not being complacent, not saying to yourself every day, it's good today, it was good yesterday, and I suppose it'll be good tomorrow, because that is not the way to think. If you know that, for some reason you're on a fault line, you're in the path of a possibly erupting volcano, or you're in Tornado Alley, or you are on a coastline where tsunamis have occurred, then I want to ask the question, how long will it be before that event that has been known to happen in that region reoccurs? And at what level of risk are you at being there? And I want you to think about the people that have died just recently, 25,000 people in Turkey, because life could have easily been saved. Some of these properties that these people were living in were built well before the knowledge of, extent, but earthquake disaster could strike, and at what levels it could strike at. So, putting yourself in a unworthy building, unsuitable to withstand a moderate earthquake, is putting yourself at greater risk. Yet people do complacently do this, and it's a gamble with their lives. And I'll bring it home to a few people on the west coast of the United States. It is overdue a super earthquake in places like California, Los Angeles. It's only a matter of time. If another 10 years pass and there hasn't been a major earthquake there that is expected to happen, then it is double the chances it's likely to happen from that point on. And another 10 years, it's quadrupled the amount of chance it's likely to happen. So every year you live in regions like this, you are putting yourself at greater danger. You are gambling with everything you own, all your loved ones, and your own life. Start being a little bit smarter. If you live in the path of obvious, reoccurring, destructive force, then and you really love your loved ones, then you really need to think about relocating somewhere more secure. And that means not buying houses or living in houses on floodplains, not buying houses in the regions of fault lines, and not buying houses in the path of possible erupting volcanoes, not buying houses in known places where they've even been given, can you believe, the name of Tornado Alley, not buying property on coastlines where there is a possible chance of a tsunami taking place. If you really value your loved ones and you value your life, and you want to continue enjoying the possessions that you've got, then you need to do a little bit more than just pay the bills. You need to do a little bit of work, analyse the risks, and reduce the chances of being caught up in a great disaster. And in turn, by doing this, you can save the risk of loss of life immensely. Because when we look at earthquakes that occur in places like Turkey, they know that they experience moderate to high magnitude earthquakes, and yet people were still living in 40, 50, 60-year-old, even 100-year-old buildings. At the time that they was built, there wasn't a lot of knowledge of how dangerous these regions were, but today there is no excuse. There is a lesson to be learned here, hopefully, if you live in Turkey, by what you have witnessed in the last week. Hopefully that is enough to make you want to make some changes so that you can protect your loved ones. Some of the more modern buildings that are built in Turkey was obviously suitable to withstand the earthquake, and obviously they never collapsed. But there was a lot of these older buildings that couldn't even stand up to a third of what was dealt at them in the last 5 days, and that's why they collapsed. That's why we've got a death toll now of 25,000 people. You can't always wait for the government to step in, make compulsory purchases on these properties and knock them down to the ground because simply they are not safe, because governments aren't going to be there for you in that way. To them, as you know, you're just a battery. You just produce taxes and revenues for them, and that's enough. You know, with regards to your own safety, you know, they put that in your hands. And you know, we've seen how quickly the governments of the world, even the first world countries, respond to, you know, major catastrophes. I'm talking about Katrina. People were just left to take care of themselves, basically. There was no real assistance at any short time for those people. And that's why, you know, I talk about this, because I think it's a good idea that you've got a food storage, a good idea that you've got a means of purifying water. You know, you have you know, obviously the tools at your disposal to check the geography of where you live and weigh up, you know, those risks that would directly affect you. So, you know, if anything today, why don't you take a little bit of time out and just have a look at the geography of where you live. You know, take note of the possible risks. If you live in a floodplain or close to a floodplain, then you want to excuse me, put a contingency plan together just in case that ever does knock at your front door. You can do something about it. You know, what we could do here today is potentially save thousands of people's lives easily by just asking them to, you know, do a risk assessment of the geography of where they live, and then put a contingency plan together that if ever the event does occur, you know, you have a plan already in place to better yourself in that situation. That's all I would love to do today, is just give people that opportunity to do that. You know, it's the weekend for a lot of us. Some of us haven't got to go to work, some of us have, I know. And you know, maybe when you get back tonight, you can make it a priority, because it really is, when you do these things, looking after your loved ones actively, and, you know, not being complacent about your own life individually out there, you know. So if you can do that, that would be good. And I know you'll benefit from doing that. So that's the message, you know, that's the important thing I wanted to talk about. Guys, there's a link down there if you want to help support us at the observatory. We're trying to save people's lives. We're trying to keep people informed of what's going on around them. We're doing our best here, but it is easier when you get a little bit of support from others. So there's a link down there if you want to help support us. Again, it's not mandatory. You know, we don't force anybody to do anything here. And as you know, we're not profit driven, because we're not selling cups, we're not selling t-shirts, we're not selling caps, baseball caps or hats or jackets. We're selling nothing. We don't even have advertisement running. So hopefully, you know, we're genuine. We have a donation bar there, and if you want to donate, that's entirely up to you. But we are genuinely trying to help people. Not just help them, but keep them informed of the current events that are taking place on our earth, because I feel it is very important. So I'll say what I usually do. You take care of your loved ones. Enjoy your weekend, guys. And I'll say what I usually do. Bye for now.